In this lesson, students learn the difference between invention and innovation. They hypothesize why so many more inventions were created in Western market economies as opposed to socialist economies. And they use clues to solve the historical mystery of the Soviet economy's failure to thrive. For this lesson, you'll need the Activity 3 slide deck, as well as one copy each of handouts 1 through 6 for each group of 3 to 4 students. Begin by asking students what they think the difference is between invention and innovation.
So, what is the difference between an invention and innovation? Any ideas?
Invention is a creation, innovation is an improvement.
An improvement. So invention, somebody creates something, innovation would be an improvement on an invention. Okay, what else? Can you add to that?
I guess the invention would be the smartphone and the innovation would be apps or updates on the smartphone every year.
After they've provided several answers, use the slide 3 to reveal the definitions. Invention is a new product or process, while innovation is the introduction of an invention into a use that has economic value.
So I'm going to give you a stack of inventions, like flight will be the one that's on there, and a table, and you're going to sort these into whether you think, and I do not want you to use your smartphones on this one, or your computers, whether you think they were invented in a socialist economy or a market economy, okay?
Divide students into groups of 3 or 4 and give each group a copy of Handout 1, as well as a copy of Handout 2 cut into strips. Ask them to guess whether each invention of the 20th century was developed in a socialist or capitalist economy by placing each strip accordingly on Handout 1.
Yeah. We all know the answer to that.
Put him out there.
The Soviet Union beat us to space, so.
First, but then who started doing it first is a question.
After a few minutes, use slide 6 to display the correct answers.
See how your answers compare? These are pulled from a variety of lists of most important inventions of the 20th century. Okay? And this is the result. Okay? Pretty close.
Ask students to hypothesize why so many inventions of the 20th century were invented in capitalist or market-based economies.
Okay, we're coming up with some hypotheses, and I have industrialization, incentives, somebody said, property rights, somebody said.
Next, give each group a copy of Handout 3 and ask them to develop a list of 4 to 6 important inventions or innovations of the 21st century. Have them include any innovations that have resulted from the initial invention and to include who the inventor was and where it was invented. Allow students to use their phones or computers to help with this part of the activity.
Yes, Christian Barnard with his team performed the first human-to-human heart transplant in 1967.
Video chatting, and then what came out of that was everything, the education and the online maintenance.
I don't know which one came first, though. It's a chicken and an egg kind of situation.
It began in the 90s.
Especially, I think you activate it through your phone.
Yeah.
I think if you turn it on.
Oh my gosh, my air freshener is activated by my phone.
Give each group time to share some or all of their findings.
Blockchain technology.
Ooh, blockchain technology. And then what else about blockchain?
Innovations in cryptocurrency.
Record a few inventions from each group on the board. Ask students if they see the same trend in the 21st century inventions as they did with the 20th century inventions.
And now asking you to look at what you think are some of the most important inventions so far in the 21st century. Do you see the same trend from the 20th century on the inventions and the innovations? And remember, it can be invented somewhere and innovation can happen somewhere else. Okay.
For the last part of the activity, tell students they're going to solve a mystery. Give each group a copy of Handout 4, the mystery, and Handout 5, the mystery directions. You could also display them as visuals using slides 12 through 16. Give each group a copy of Handout 6, the the clues, cut into individual strips. Instruct the groups to split up the clues evenly and to go around the group taking turns to read each clue aloud. As they read through the clues, they should sort them into 3 piles. Clues that provide information about people's responses to incentives, clues that provide information about how property rights shape incentives, and clues that provide information about how markets, profit, and competition shape incentives. As they consider the piles of clues, they should look for ways in which the Soviet economy was similar to or different from the economies of the West. Some suggested questions for group discussion could be, how did intellectual property rights in the Soviet Union differ from those in the West? What incentives motivated researchers in the Soviet Union? What incentives motivate researchers in the West? How did invention and innovation spread in the Soviet Union? How do they spread in the West? Finally, the small group should solve the mystery, or in other words, explain in one sentence why, despite their high level of education, their wealth of resources, and their government's commitment to support of research, the Soviet standard of living was half that of the United States.
Okay, so now we're going to hear your solutions to the mystery, and we're going to start with our large group in the back. Go ahead, Scott.
Despite all the resources for a robust economy, without proper incentives, innovation stagnates.
Ooh, I like that.
Debrief this activity with questions on slides 17 through 19. For example, you might ask students to compare and contrast the Soviet Union and the West in terms of who engages in research and what incentives they have to do so. Clues 1, 4, and 10 show that research in the Soviet Union was directed by the government and confined mainly to areas that had military or political significance. Researchers were employees of the government and were motivated by their interest and their pay, and to some extent by the promise of status and recognition. Clues 7 and 12 show that while there is government-sponsored research with a military purpose in the U.S., there are also significant university-sponsored and private research efforts. Researchers are private or university employees. American researchers share many of the motivations of Soviet researchers, but additionally, they have the important incentive of royalties and other monetary rewards for successful innovation. Another important debrief question would be to ask how the Soviet institutions of property rights and markets differed from those institutions in the West. Clues 4 and 10 show how the Soviet Union claimed to recognize intellectual property rights and did issue patents and copyrights just like the U.S. did. However, Soviet patents and copyrights did not grant the intellectual rights holder any economic rights. The inventor or innovator got only the status that goes with being able to claim the invention, while the Soviet government held the right to actually use the invention. Clue 2 illustrates how the Soviet Union claimed to have markets, but it had no market pricing. Prices were set by the government in state stores, so there was no objective way to value an innovation.
If you had to generalize, what kind of economic institutions would you expect to find in countries with high levels of innovation? I gave you property rights. What else? Incentives. Specifically, what kind of motivation would you see for profit and incentives? Like, if I'm a business owner, how am I going to know if I'm profitable? Money, prices, right? Price signals. That's a language that we all speak. Even though we speak English and they, you know, there's different languages around the world, money, prices are a universal language that we all understand, even if there's different currencies, right?
As you wrap up the activity, reinforce the idea that in countries with high levels of innovation, you would expect to find relatively open markets and secure intellectual property rights, because these institutions foster incentives that encourage innovation by rewarding the successful innovator. Factors such as relative wealth, levels of education, and abundance of resources do not adequately explain differences in innovative activity. The presence or absence of institutions that provide incentives for innovators does explain differences in levels of innovation. The major innovations of the 20th and 21st centuries come from nations with open markets and secure property rights.